What's up, everybody? It's the WaitingForNextYear.com podcast. Today, I have another guest, but first, I want to talk to you a little bit. I got some feedback recently, some positive, some negative. Not everybody loves all the guests. Not everybody loves all the guests, but thanks so much for all the listenership, all the feedback. I think we're due to have the biggest month the podcast has ever done. And I just want to thank everybody for putting up with me while I was testing out my one man and a mic kind of podcasts. And now that I'm back to booking a bunch of guests and doing some solo stuff as well, it was all part of an effort to bring things together. And it's cool to know that everybody's out there listening. So, I get some direct messages. You know who you are. I get some texts. I get some tweets and Facebook messages, and it's great. I really appreciate everybody letting me know that they're out there listening and letting me know that they appreciate the content. So I'll keep doing it. I love it. It's so much fun. But part of doing it and loving it is now we have some sponsors. And so this podcast is brought to you by Audible. You can get your free 30-day trial, over 180,000 titles available, one free audiobook download. I know, just one out of 180,000 when you try it out. But, once you fall in love, you'll be doing one a week, one a month, whatever it is you decide to do. Audibletrial.com/WFNY, audibletrial.com/WFNY. Also, I know everybody is seeing these advertisements all over the place, but you can come on FanDuel and actually play with other Waiting for Next Year people. So sign up at tinyurl.com/FanDuelWFNY. That's tinyurl.com/FanDuelWFNY. And now, I didn't even tell you who the guest was, but now here's Ben Axelrod. We'll be talking about some football, I'm sure some Buckeyes, and I always love talking to Ben Axelrod. So here he is.
Waiting for next year.
As I stated in the open, here's Ben Axelrod. How's it going, man?
It's going well.
You were like, for a lot of people out there in podcast land, you were going to be a palate cleanser. the mentions on Twitter when you do anything with Chuck Booms, I would hate to see his Twitter mentions on a daily basis. It's a tough life, man.
Yeah, I didn't tag anybody in my tweet, but I did comment on it. I don't know if you saw it, but I got a kick out of him continually referring to Jeff Fisher as the Tennessee Titans head coach. It just kind of fit the whole persona he has of being kind of stuck in 1999.
Well, I just, I appreciated.
It's only been 4 years.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, the dude was with Tennessee for how long? And I don't know. It probably doesn't really even mean much to the actual analysis, but
no. But when your argument for the Browns making a mistake by getting rid of Terrence West is that Jeff Fisher picked him up and Jeff Fisher knows what he's doing, that argument kind of takes a hit when it wasn't Jeff Fisher who actually picked him up. And it's funny because Ken Wisenhunt might actually make the argument better. Right? Yeah.
Either way, it's I like having a variety of voices on the podcast. It's always tough for me when I have somebody who draws that negative reaction though, because people just they trust you enough to listen to you as a host, but then they are terrified that you could possibly have a guest that may not align or something. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't, especially considering that podcasting is a on-demand format. I'm not sure anybody would be upset with any guest you have on.
Yeah, go ahead and skip one. It's no big deal. Because some people, and I get it. First, I'll tell you that they're some of the most popular podcasts I've ever done. The Scott Rabb podcasts were huge.
Oh, those are my favorite.
They did huge numbers, but there was a quiet minority a quiet minority of people who would skip them because they didn't appreciate Scott's tone or whatever, and that's fine, no big deal.
Yeah, no, those are my favorite. That's actually how I got turned on to your guys' podcasts. I think it was the 2013 season, you were doing them pretty consistently every Monday, and those were kind of must listen to for me.
Yeah, well, and that was kind of like, if you can get a world-class writer, one of the best in the business, the top 1% of all people who write words for a living in the universe, or the planet, you should probably talk to that guy as much as possible.
Oh, no, without a doubt. And yeah, people might not care for his negative tone or his kind of negative outlook when it comes to Cleveland sports and especially the Browns, but more times than not, I'd say he's been vindicated. He's been right, and he's wanted to be wrong, which is also admirable. So before we get started, I had a note, a little bullet point here to just ask you. You have to choose Josh McCown helicopter or Brandon Weeden flag trap. Oh, the helicopter. That was absolutely the most spectacular play I have seen in Browns season opener history. I mean, the way that you could literally see him reaching for glory and him saying, "See, this is it. Tampa Bay was just a blip. I've still got it," and dive into the end zone. I've never seen. I was in a bar watching it with a lot of Browns fans, and I've never heard such audible laughter for a negative Browns play in all my life. It really was spectacular.
Well, and I've said this before, that at some point I kind of look at the Browns not emotionally like a fan anymore, kind of like an anthropologist studying a primitive culture or something. And so I saw that play, and I saw the ball roll to the back of the end zone and the Jets cover up, and I wasn't even pissed off. I was just kind of like,
oh, no.
Huh.
No, absolutely. I mean, it's only 16 weeks a year. I think it's a little easier not to get as wrapped up with them, especially with all that we've seen from them in the last 16 years. But, that was certainly a way to kick off the season unlike any other.
It's kind of like a comedy. If you go see a comedy, an Adam Sandler movie in a theater, you might laugh because laughter is kind of infectious. It's the same with the Browns. If I'm sitting on my couch at home and I'm watching and I'm tweeting and I'm writing and I'm doing all this stuff, it's going to be whatever. But the minute I get in that stadium, like I went to the Colts game last year, the Browns versus Colts game, and I lost my mind when Paul Kruger got flagged for roughing the passer, whatever it was. But if I'd been sitting on my couch, I probably would have just been like, huh.
Yeah, and a lot of it is, dependent on how the season is going. At that point, there was still hope. I think that was Hoyer's last start, so things or his last start before the Johnny start, so things hadn't really come off the rails yet. But yeah, when you're watching with people, and you're right, when you're in the stadium, it's definitely a different vibe. But just the not only the helicopter play, but the swing from that to then Johnny's touchdown pass on the next series. That was kind of typical Browns season opener if I've ever seen it.
Well, that and the one play that nobody's talking about, because I mean it was kind of unremarkable in a lot of ways, but it was so. I was just waiting for the reaction because it was so Browns to watch Johnny Manziel roll out, kind of almost get wrapped up, and throw the ball out of bounds with his left hand.
Yeah.
I was like, that just seems like a bad idea. It's a bad highlight to put on film, regardless of whether it's smart or not.
Yeah. Who did the Oregon quarterback did that on Saturday night against Michigan State and completed the pass, actually.
You mean not Marcus Mariota?
Yeah, not Marcus Mariota.
Dude doesn't have a name. It's just not Marcus Mariota.
Yeah, he completed it, and then I think he threw an interception with his right hand on the next play. So some people were joking he should have kept throwing with his left. But, yeah, I mean, we have no shortage of those plays in our memory banks. They kind of all blend together at this point.
Yeah, so you mentioned college football. How concerned, or it seems weird to be concerned about a 38-0 win that the Buckeyes had over Hawai'i, but then again they didn't look good. I'm struck by watching the Buckeyes this year because you never really had the side-by-side comparison of all three of these quarterbacks. Braxton Miller played, and then he didn't make it to the next season, and JT Barrett played, and then he went down. and there was a lot of rest time between the games where he played and Cardale Jones started playing, and so I never really got the side-by-side, and I found myself going, wow, Cardale's a lot bigger than I thought, and he's not as fast as I thought, because you get that direct comparison with JT Barrett and Braxton Miller. How weird is it to watch this team now with all three of those guys healthy?
No, that's certainly interesting, and I mean it's even more fascinating that they're in a situation now where all three are playing and all three are taking snaps behind center. They're running a lot more Wildcat with Braxton than I anticipated. I thought they would, but I didn't think it would be something we see on basically every series. And you're right, you do see the differences and the strengths and weaknesses in all three. Going back to what you were saying about that Hawaii game, I mean, trust me, I'm not one to ever make excuses for this team, especially with the talent advantage they have. But to me, that just looked like a classic case of they played that Virginia Tech game Monday night and had to turn around and basically had 2 days to prepare for Hawaii. And to get a 38-0 shutout win, I think obviously you take that regardless of how sloppy the offense looked. But these two first games, I think, have kind of been a microcosm of what this season is going to look like for the Buckeyes. I don't think it's going to be a very fun season. And you just look at the opponents they have coming up. They're going to be playing in a lot of lopsided games where maybe you are disappointed if they're not playing to their potential. Really, the only two games they have before the Michigan game that would have you excited for anything is maybe that Penn State game, and then obviously that Michigan State game that looks like it's going to be basically a de facto play-in game. But last season turned out to be a really fun season, and you had all the cliches of their backs against the wall and everybody counting them out and all this stuff. But this year they're the favorites, and it's going to be a lot less fun being chased in the manner which the Buckeyes are.
Can Cardale Jones be the same Cardale Jones that he was last year if he's looking over his shoulder, if JT Barrett's getting a couple of opportunities per game and he doesn't get to just kind of continually play and wear defenses down all the way to the fourth quarter?
I don't know. And I don't really like what Urban has done with the quarterback situation through two games. I liked it more so in the Virginia Tech game. He pretty much stuck with Cardale until the game was out of hand. But I think if that game wasn't the first game of the season, I think you might have seen him make the switch to JT at halftime. I just don't think he wanted to set the precedent that he had that quick of a trigger for Cardale. But neither quarterback I know likes playing in a two-quarterback system. They both kind of said that in the preseason. And it's just weird to have, two guys who, regardless of which one is in there, is kind of a Heisman contender, yet you keep kind of flip-flopping back and forth between the two of them. Unless things really got stagnant with that offense, and we've seen it get stagnant a little, but not anything where it's put, a game in question aside from that second quarter against Virginia Tech. I'd like to see them just stick with one guy and kind of ride him out until you really need to make that switch.
All right. So as a writer in sports media, I need to know if I missed the memo, if I missed, when this became the way that you do things. But the apostrophe in Hawai'i, since when?
Oh, I don't know. That caught me off guard too. I saw a lot of my colleagues doing that.
And well, we need to talk about it. I'm tired of this going unspoken.
Yeah, no, I agree. I was going to call some people out on Saturday, but got a little wrapped up in everything else. I've never seen that before. Like I've never seen it in school. I've never seen it in my years of watching college football and Timmy Chang and Colt Brennan. It always was just Hawai'i, no apostrophe. But I think it's like between the two eyes they're adding it. I've never seen that.
Yeah, it's between the two eyes, and I wonder if this is like the latest cultural sensitivity where someday we'll be deemed racist for having written Hawai'i without the apostrophe. And I'm making light, people. Let's not crucify me.
I remember in 2010.
And if there's some like deep gravity that makes a lot of sense and I'm just ignorant about it, let's not rake me over the coals for it, okay?
No, I'm just as ignorant. I remember in 2010 when the Cavs were in their first talks to trade for Amari Stoudemire, and I guess I hadn't realized that he had added the apostrophe to his name, and I was like on the Real Cavs fans message board, and everybody was using the apostrophe, and I was like, "What the hell are you people doing?" And then it turned out I was the idiot in that situation.
Okay, the apostrophe is called an okina, and it doesn't mean letters were left out. It stands for what they call a guttural stop, when you close your throat to make a quick pause when saying the word.
Oh man!
So it's Hawai'i.
I've never seen that before in my life, and I don't plan on starting to use it now.
Well, it's apparently because it's part of a Polynesian language, roots in Polynesian language. So
duly noted.
It's really funny though, because when you bring up Amari Stoudemire, you said Stoudemire, right?
Yep.
Yeah, I was writing about Dwayne Bowe, and I've been so NBA-ized that I spelled like Dwyane Wade with the YA instead of the AY. Yeah. And I have to correct myself. I'm correcting the correction because there was once upon a time where I missed that memo, and I never realized that Dwayne, maybe my eyes just skipped over it every single time I read it, but I didn't know Dwyane Wade spelled his name wrong until 2 years ago. Yeah. I was really late to that game.
Me too. And once I figured it out, I think just like you, I kind of overcorrected myself and made that the right way to spell Dwayne, even though spelling Dwayne with the Y before the A makes no sense whatsoever.
Yeah. What other NFL actions stuck out at you this weekend? I do want to talk about the Brian Hoyer situation in Houston just for a little bit because it feels a little Clevelandish.
Yeah, I thought that was kind of funny. The bar I was at, everybody was kind of commiserating over the Browns, and but the only thing keeping hope alive was seeing Brian Hoyer get benched. I think it's funny the venom that the Cleveland fan base, or at least a portion of the Cleveland fan base, seems to have toward Brian Hoyer, who for all indications wasn't that bad of a guy and led your team to 7 wins ago. I don't know how you could pin anything that's really gone wrong with this franchise in the past year or so on Brian Hoyer. I know he wasn't the greatest mentor to Johnny, and the way that Josh McCown has seemingly taken Johnny under his wings, that makes Brian look even worse. But
I don't think Johnny was a good mentee last year.
Yeah, who's to say Johnny was around? All indications are he was the last one in the building and the first one out, and Lord knows what he was doing with his free time. But I think it's funny that even just seeing the reaction to Brian Hoyer on Hard Knocks, the irrational hate for Brian Hoyer that some people have in this city.
Yeah, well, and I remember reading a couple of quotes out of Houston about Brian Hoyer and was Bill, what's his name?
O'Brien?
Bill O'Brien was saying that, when they brought Brian Hoyer in, they thought that there were some opportunities for him to hold the job for a while, and that there were some missed opportunities just in terms of coaching in Cleveland last year. And then to see their game plan in week one that basically Brian Hoyer was on pace to throw 50 passes.
Yeah.
And it's like, dude, if you found a deficit in coaching in Cleveland last year and you brought this guy in and handed him the starting job and your plan was to have him throw 50 times a game, I don't know what coaching deficit you're capable of seeing.
Yeah, and we saw a couple of games like that last year. I just think to get benched for a guy, Ryan Mallett, who overslept a practice a couple of weeks ago, that early in the season is pretty interesting. I don't know what their quarterback situation is moving forward. I don't know if this was just like an in-game benching and they're going back to Brian or what the deal is. The other thing that I found interesting was Buffalo looks like a problem. Buffalo looks like they're going to be pretty good. I did not expect them to take care of the Colts the way they did.
Well, and the Colts just played badly, first of all, because I watched that game as well because my wife's a Colts fan. So that was on the second TV in my house. But the Bills, they underperformed, I think, based on their previous coach and certainly over the last couple of years. And they were poised to take off. And what did they do? They went out and they get LaShawn McCoy. And that's how you go ahead and you marginalize a quarterback on your roster. If you're Houston, if you're Cleveland, if you're Buffalo, and you've got Brian Hoyer, Ryan Mallett, Tyrod Taylor, Johnny Manziel, and Josh McCown as your quarterback options, you better shore up your running game. You better shore up your skill positions. People are tired of hearing me say that about the Jets and what they did with Brandon Marshall, but go ahead and look at Buffalo. I mean, that's what you do. That's how you marginalize the quarterback position as best as you can.
No, absolutely. And I mean, do you want to get into the Browns right now? Because I have thoughts on the Browns.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I actually went out on Friday and I bought Madden and I started playing a couple of games with the Browns, and they had updated the rosters and taken Pryor off the roster and everything. I found myself saying, like, who's going to score touchdowns on this team? This team is probably the least fun team I've ever played with in a video game. Isaiah Crowell can't rush for more than 2 yards at a time. He can't break a tackle. There's no wide receivers who can get any sort of separation from a defensive back. And you look at this roster and it's I mean, I'm kind of saying that tongue in cheek with the video game, but it really is just a roster full of deficiencies, which I thought were only going to be on offense, but this defense looks like it's going to have issues too.
How mad are Browns coaches at Dwayne Bowe right now? I mean, outwardly they have to just express frustration in moderation, but behind the scenes, you know that they've got to be just absolutely pissed off at this guy for not being on the field, because he was their big acquisition of the offseason.
Yeah, and I don't know if they're pissed at Dwayne Bowe or if they're pissed at Ray Farmer. I mean, Tony Grossi wrote it today, and you can think whatever you think about Tony Grossi, but I mean, I think that the Dwayne Bowe signing does kind of epitomize the kind of dysfunction between the front office and the coaching staff. I mean, this clearly seems like a guy who Farmer wanted, and the coaching staff is clearly anything but in love with, and I don't know the extent of his hamstring issues or how legitimate they are, but I mean, even that's a Band-Aid. That's not a guy who you can count on. That's at best case, he's a rich man's Miles Austin. I mean, Dwayne Bowe didn't score a touchdown last year with a better team and a better quarterback, so I don't really know what you were hoping to get from him this year.
Well, I mean, obviously it's one of those cases where I said Bill O'Brien thought he saw coaching deficiency or scheme deficiency. The Browns and DiFilippo or whatever, felt like they could get more out of Dwayne Bowe in their offensive scheme somehow, some way. And I honestly, on paper, I liked the moves. But here we are, 7 weeks since the Browns reported for training camp, and we've seen nothing but first and second quarter of the fourth preseason game type productivity from Dwayne Bowe. It's almost that's where I think, whether it's Farmer, whether it's Pettin, they've got to be just livid that this guy can't get on the field.
Yeah, and I mean that's an issue,
because it's not like he broke his leg.
No, but I mean that's if you're pinning your hopes to Dwayne Bowe for the season, that's an issue in and of itself. Like, this is really I guess I usually am kind of negative when it comes to the Browns, but this is truly the least optimistic I've been about a team moving forward. I really think this is one of the worst rosters that they have put together in a long time. And I mean, you hate for them to have to clear house again, but with the track record that Ray Farmer is putting together in drafts, and Mike Pettin's on a 6-game losing streak, and I thought we saw some major coaching blunders on Sunday. You have to start thinking pretty soon here about starting over again.
Well, I'm going to disagree with you there. I certainly think Farmer is on thin ice, especially because of the suspension. But then again, we also don't know. It's widely been talked about that Farmer was probably, or maybe could have been, allegedly, possibly, potentially, maybe texting on behalf of his owner. So,
well, yeah, I to quote.
Did I say allegedly?
Yeah, and to quote the Spygate or the Deflategate manifesto, I'd say it's probably more probable than not that Jimmy Haslam had something to do with those texts.
So I it's hard, but I don't think I wouldn't put Pettin on thin ice. I think that this defense played better and better as the season went along last year, and I and this is probably where we should finish. I do think the roster is probably better than it has been. It's probably not good enough, and certainly what they did at tight end looks abysmal, and the way the running backs turned out looks pretty abysmal too. But I really, in my head and my heart, think that they're going to crush Tennessee on Sunday.
Oh, I do not know how you see that.
I think we saw Tampa in the preseason, and I know it's the preseason, but that team absolutely stinks. Absolutely stinks.
How is this Browns team going to score points, though?
I think their defense will step up, and Tennessee's going to deliver the turnovers on a silver platter.
But I mean, Mariota. I mean, I know it was college. He doesn't really turn the ball over all that often. Like
Yeah.
if the Browns won this game, it wouldn't shock me. I guess just because it's at home, and if you look at the schedule, they're probably not going to go 0-16. So you have to find those wins somewhere. But I mean, the Jets are a really bad team. Like that was a bad team that they played.
They were a bad team, but I think they underperformed. They had Rex Ryan, who was a dead man walking last year. I don't think they were like, if Tampa is a true awful team, I think the Jets were like a mediocre team in a down year. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but I think the Brown. I mean, I'm not seeing a lot of differences between this Browns offense and that Tampa Bay offense. I'm really not. I mean, I don't know how this team scores points, whether it's Johnny or Josh McCown, and I know Booms was in love with Johnny per usual, but like aside from that first half, Johnny played pretty bad the rest of the way.
Yeah, he really did. I agree with you there.
And you take away one touchdown throw on kind of a broken play that still looked like a high school throw.
Are you going to talk me out of my optimism for week 2?
Man, I'm sorry. I hate to do it. I just don't see how you can be confident in this roster blowing out anyone right now.
Well, I think the Browns, especially from the line and the defensive secondary, I think they played about as poorly as you could imagine them playing in an opener. And the quality parts of the team didn't play well at all, and that just rolls straight downhill.
Right. No, I mean that the offensive line is supposed to be, the best left side in football, and the Jets have a good offensive line, so I'm not going to press the panic button on Danny Shelton, even though Nick Mangold kind of handled him there. But the secondary didn't play good. The linebackers didn't play. But I have a really hard time finding positives about anything that this Browns team did just based on what we saw on Sunday. And maybe it is just a one-game sample size. I mean, we saw that game in 2007, the magical 10-6 season. They started out getting blown out. Was it by the Steelers in the opener, and then they cut Charlie Fry the next day? But I just don't see anything that this team can really hang its hat on right now moving forward.
Well, right now, I think I'm looking here. It looks like the Browns are either a pick'em, a tiny favorite, depending on the sports book. So
I think I saw them like a 0.5 favorite, which at home really, isn't anything to write home.
That's might as well be a pick'em.
Right.
So I guess if I was the hotline sports betting guy, you could call now for my lock of the week, and the Browns would be my lock of the week.
Oh man, I just don't. And if you bring in a new GM, you would have to imagine that GM's going to want to bring in his own coach. I just, I really, it's not a coincidence that every year it's the same teams who are picking in the top 8 of the draft. It seems like it's always St. Louis and the Texans and the Browns and the Raiders, and there seems to be this group of like 4 or 5 teams that are always picking somewhere in the top 8. And the only difference is the Browns are the only one of those teams that continually trades out of its pick and tries to outthink the room and never makes good on the value that it gets out of those picks. And I really feel like this is the year where the Browns really bottom out and hopefully walk out of next year's draft with a quarterback.
Oh man, I hope you're wrong. In a lot of ways, I know a lot of people are rooting with you, whether it's Phil for Cardale. I mean, I know that's just kind of a joke because who knows if he's even going to be close to the top quarterback here.
Right.
available. But he's not the best quarterback on his team, it wouldn't appear.
Yeah, no. I talked to
every I'm sorry to cut you off, but every hardcore Buckeye fan I know wanted JT Barrett to start this year.
Yeah, no. I saw a few kind of fights for Cardale, but the overall consensus with fans seems to be JT. But that might be a thing where JT just suits the college game and Urban Meyer's offense better. I don't think Cardale is necessarily a pure spread quarterback. I talked to an NFL guy who said that even if Cardale didn't start, he'd still be in contention for a first-round pick just because of his raw skills. Connor Cook is the one I have my eye on right now, though. Another nice homecoming story for a Northeast Ohio kid.
Yeah, well, and he was the early favorite, and apparently everyone talked early on that the Browns were out scouting him already. Like that was some indication of anything. That's just what you're supposed to do.
Oh no, absolutely. But I'm not rooting for it, although I might get to the point where if this team looks as hopeless as it seems, where I do start rooting to just land one of those top picks and finally draft a quote unquote franchise quarterback, and Lord knows if he would wind up being successful. But I'm just, Sunday was depressing. Like I thought, like last year they got down big to Pittsburgh and came back and almost won the game, and then they had that big comeback win against the Saints the week after. But
yep.
I just that team, that was such an uninspiring performance from the players, from the coaching staff, from the front office that assembled it. That was really, it felt a little like close to rock bottom as a Browns fan, quite honestly.
It did. And we're going to find out a whole lot about the coaching staff, and not only them, but the leaders in the locker room, because we're going to find out right now this week against Tennessee in the home opener just how much pride there is among the leadership in that locker room because they know they played like garbage. Joe Hayden, Joe Thomas, all those, Carlos Dansby, Dante Whitner, those guys know that they can play better than that. And they know that they didn't show up and that they barely showed up in the second half. And so I think we're going to see, and maybe they don't have any pride. We'll find out. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't, Joe Hayden didn't play good by any stretch of the imagination, but he got off to a slow start last year, and I think there was an injury thing or something, and he doesn't play a lot in the preseason anyway. So I don't really worry about Joe. The offensive line, that was kind of my concern. That was supposed to be the strength, and I think that we might have, Joe Thomas isn't on a upswing right now. I think he's probably nearing the back end of his career, and Alex Mack didn't play very good, and the makeup of this team, it's just alarming to me.
Well, not just to you. My Twitter feed is fugly. I'm trying to compartmentalize a little bit and just remember that these teams find themselves in the first 3 or 4 games of the year, and maybe it's just as bad as the Jets game showed us. But maybe the Jets are better than we think too. Maybe that defense was just tired of Rex Ryan's voice and needed a change of voice in the locker room. And they're going to be the turnaround story of the AFC East. You just never know.
Yeah, and you've got Tennessee this week, and you've got Oakland the week after, both at home. So I think we'll obviously know a lot more about the trajectory and the ceiling of this Browns team. But after that, it gets a little rough. These were 3 of the more winnable games on the schedule. After that, I think you go to San Diego, and then I think you might get into some division play after that. But we'll learn a lot about this team in these next 2 weeks. That's for sure.
Well, congrats to you, man. We went an entire podcast and we didn't even pretend like we cared whether Johnny Manziel or Josh McCown started this game. It doesn't matter, and we're not going to talk about it. What do you got on tap? You're obviously writing all season. It's the heart of your coverage season. So what's everybody looking out for you?
Yeah, I'm covering the Big Ten this year. It's a little different. I usually just cover the Buckeyes, but with Jim Harbaugh coming and Michigan State looking like a playoff contender, they kind of expanded my role. So Until this quarterback thing really gets settled, I'm going to be pretty locked in on Ohio State. I think I'll be in Columbus most weekends. I think I'll be in Ann Arbor when Michigan plays BYU, and I'm interested to see how this Michigan season goes, obviously. But yeah, just, in my busy season, the summer kind of drags on, so it's good to be busy again. I got to ask you, and this might get us into another disagreement. I got to ask you what your take, though, is on the Tristan Thompson situation, because that's kind of been eating at me for the past couple of weeks.
I am just trying to consider it an experiment that's in the middle of the experiment. It's like a process that hasn't been completed. So I'm trying not to jump to any conclusions. I'm concerned too, because if the Cavaliers play chicken too long, they're just going to find themselves on the outside looking in. They cannot replace Tristan Thompson, and that's the leverage that he has.
Absolutely. And yes, I agree with you wholeheartedly. And I'm right with you. I'm trying not to get wrapped up in it, because this is restricted free agency, and restricted free agency is always messy in the NBA. And you look at what happened with Eric Bledsoe last year, and I don't think he wound up signing until October, maybe. But if the Cavs don't come to a long-term agreement, I'm going to hold that against Dan Gilbert, because this is really just a matter of not paying a guy what you think he's worth. And I think the Cavs are in a position where they can afford to be overpaying players with the window that they have and the situation that they're in. And then the other thing that kind of frustrates me is, that this team caught breaks when Kyrie and Kevin Love signed the extensions when they did, and JR opting out and coming back for less money. And you're always going to be paying LeBron about half of what he really should be getting paid. And I think if there's a player on this team you can afford to overpay, it's Tristan Thompson. And I'm going to be really frustrated if he winds up playing this year on the qualifying offer, because Dan Gilbert was trying to save some money on the luxury tax. I know that's easy to say when it's not my money, but the guy is worth about $5 billion. If he really is as committed to bringing a championship to Cleveland as he says, I think you got to get this Tristan Thompson deal done.
Yeah, and that's why I'm trying not to overreact as we're in the middle of the story, because you and I both, what you said is 100% right. The Cavaliers have no choice. They have to get it done. There's nothing else for them to do but to get this done, even if it costs them every last penny. So I understand why they're waiting and why they're posturing, just to see if they can get some kind of a discount. But in the end, I'd be shocked if he plays on the qualifying offer. Shocked.
Yeah, I mean, he bet on himself last year, so he's shown that he'll do it before, and he's never been hurt. So, but I don't think that's even what Rich Paul and LeBron would advise. I think they'd want to get through this year without that being a distraction again. And that's another thing. The Cavs played chicken last year, and Tristan played his way into a bigger contract. So they really should have gotten this deal done a year ago, and they just didn't. But you're absolutely right. It's way too early to jump to conclusions on either side. I get frustrated when I start to see fans getting angry with Tristan, when this is a guy who has, he's not a max player in the sense of the term max player, but he is a guy who pretty much has the leverage to negotiate close to a max contract if he wants one.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely true. And I've noted that, the tide has the popularity tide has kind of turned against Tristan Thompson, and I don't find that really all that shocking. But anybody who actually understands the dynamics of the cap and player movement and luxury taxes and everything else knows that I don't know why Rich Paul has to play it so nasty.
Right.
Because everybody's leverage is their leverage. He can't win the PR battle with Tristan Thompson looking for the most possible money, even though he's right. Like, he's got all the leverage behind the scenes. He can't win in the press, so I'm not sure why he's trying to win in the press.
Yeah, floating the whole he'll just go to Toronto thing. I mean, you do have to put it out there, I guess, that there is another team that will pay him next summer. But, yeah, I could understand how that could rub fans the wrong way, especially when it's the whole, rings versus money thing. So
does Rich Paul think he can win that PR battle though? Did he misjudge the fan support for Tristan Thompson?
Potentially. I think he knows as long as he has LeBron in Tristan's corner. I think that's always going to be kind of a feather in their cap. That's what surprised to see fans say the things that they've said about Tristan, a guy who, on the court and off the court has represented himself with really nothing but class. I mean, he when they were rookies and in their third and fourth years, he was a hell of a lot more mature than Kyrie Irving was when it came to a lot of the situations the Cavs found themselves in. So, we've been through this kind of before. I remember Andy went through a messy free agency after 2007, and I think Sasha Pavlovich, whether you remember it or not. So these things will sort themselves out. I will be really disappointed if the belief was Dan Gilbert's going to open his, and Lord knows he's spending enough already, but if they let this Tristan thing come down to money, that's really going to frustrate me.
Yeah, well, thanks again for coming on, man. You're so much fun to talk to because you can talk about absolutely anything. I feel like I could throw anything at you.
Absolutely. Anytime. I appreciate it.
All right. Until next time, everybody, it's the WaitingForNextYear.com podcast.
Waiting for next year.
And there you have it, the podcast with Ben Axelrod. Little secret, I'm recording this before I ever talked to Ben, so I have no idea if it was a good conversation or if we discussed anything good or not. So yeah, it was awesome. Awesome to talk to Ben Axelrod. It's always great to see what's on his mind. Can't believe he said that one thing about the Browns. It's crazy. It's crazy. By the way, this podcast is brought to you by Audible, audibletrial.com/WFNY, audibletrial.com/WFNY. 30-day free trial, 1 free audiobook download, and it's a great service. You're not reading enough. You're certainly not reading enough books because you're reading Waiting for Next Year. So whether you're commuting, exercising, whatever you're doing, get an audiobook. It'll make it go faster. audibletrial.com/WFNY. And also, if you want to play 1 week fantasy football with the Waiting for Next Year guys, tinyurl.com/FanDuel WFNY. tinyurl.com/FanDuel WFNY. Thanks so much for visiting our sponsors and listening to the podcast. Again, I want to thank everybody for listening. I want to thank everybody who tells other people about the podcast. That's really what makes this thing go. So your feedback is to go and say something to Ben Axelrod on Twitter. You need to go find him. He's at Ben Axelrod, at BENAXELROD, and tell him that you liked his appearance on the podcast. Thanks so much, guys. Talk to you later. Bye.